I wasn't critiquing her story. I was saying, okay, if this is the story you want to tell, this is what you need to do. I wasn't telling her whether it was a good story or a bad story. I wasn't like that. That's that's subjective. I said, if this is the one story you want to tell, this is what it needs. And at the end of we talked for about an hour. It was like she had witnessed a magic trick.
You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin.
So today's episode, we're talking about breaking into the business and how I got into the business and how this whole podcast even started. So I've been a professional TV writer for 26 years. And Phil here, my podcasting partner, he's been begging me for years to basically start an online screenwriting course to tell everyone what I've learned, as an opportunity.
Selfishly, I should add, this is something I wanted for myself, and to kind of take it a step back here too. I have probably paid for every screenwriting program on the internet, and I've been doing that for the last decade.
Yeah.
And then I went to film school and got a bachelor's degree specifically in screenwriting. And I still feel like I've learned more from private lessons from you or just off-the-cuff emails you sent to me, reviewing something or giving me notes. And so when I say I've been begging for this course, I remember sitting in my car. I was on a business trip to Utah, and back in 2015 maybe. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you need to do a course on screenwriting. And so I wanted this.
I was surprised that you hadn't learned any of this in film school. That's what always shocked me. It's like, well, what are they teaching you there?
And I think for most people, I consider myself an autodidact, meaning I teach myself things. Mm-hmm. And when I went to film school, it was more of a networking thing through, being a Robert Redford scholar and trying to get some more ins in the Sundance independent community. But a lot of the things that they teach in film school match up with things that I learned in these other paid courses and things that I'd taken online or in screenwriting books. And so for a while I was like, oh yeah, this must be what screenwriting is. Mm-hmm. And then I remember, to kind of give some background on how we know each other, I worked in a digital marketing agency, and I was actually the account manager for your wife's online business. And I had never met you over the course of several years. And there was at one point your wife was like, oh, my husband Michael's going to be getting on the call while he waits for his next show to start up. He's going to help me out with marketing. Mm-hmm. And she didn't know that I had been wanting to be a screenwriter for this whole time and taking these courses. And I remember I said, show? And he's like, oh yeah, he's going to be running Mark Maron's new show. And I was like, okay. And then I looked her up and I realized she's in Angry Beavers, which I grew up watching. She was on Real Monsters, and she's an actress. Right. I had no idea. And just goes to show you never know anything about anybody. You can't just judge a book by its cover at all. And then you were, I guess at some point I'd generated enough goodwill with you through her that you were like, oh, I was like, we got on a call. I was like, I'm trying to break in. And you're like, I'm trying to break out. Just a funny comment. And so you sent me some screenwriting books. You got me a subscription to the Writers Guild magazine, which was very helpful. And then I just remember this first email you sent, and you're like, what's the definition of a story? And I gave it to you, and you were like, I think I said, it's about someone who becomes, someone who goes through trials and ends up better in the end. And you were like, what about King Lear? He goes nuts.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I know nothing. That was about the point when I was like, I have learned nothing over all of this time, learning formatting and how to use the software. So, that's kind of about the time it clicked as well, that these people who are teaching things may not actually be teaching what the industry considers to be craft.
Yeah, that's because I didn't go to film school. I don't know many writers or any that did go to film school. So film school is a mystery to us. I don't know why people go. I don't know what they're teaching, and I suspect that it's being taught by professional teachers and not by actual TV writers or screenwriters with a lot of experience.
I had maybe one or two really good screenwriting professors in my bachelor's program, and one of them wrote some major hits in the 80s.
Okay.
He was a working pro, and he was legitimate. We were in a working campus, so there was stages, and they shot the show Longmire. So we had the opportunity to have the showrunners of Longmire come in and speak to us. Those were probably some of the best things about going to film school for me. I think a lot of people who want to learn camera work and want to learn what it means to, run a set from a PA or a first director or to direct. I think there were a lot of benefits in that regard. Right. But from a writing perspective, not a lot, man. My TV writing class, we wrote one spec script the entire semester, which seems like a lot, but it's not when you're a writer, right?
Right. Well, and that's what led, you were like, hey, put together a course, and I just didn't have the time or desire. But then the pandemic hit, and I had, Hollywood shut. I was like, we're all gonna be hiding under beds for a year, and I just knew it was gonna shut down the industry immediately. So, and it did for me for sure. Everyone, we had nothing to do. So I had all this time, and I was like, all right, I'll put together this course, and it took a couple months. And so that we put together a course, and if anyone's interested, that's at michaeljamin.com/course. But from the people who signed up for it, they kind of became rabid, and they just wanted more and more stuff. And then
lots of questions. We were doing webinars. We were breaking down case studies of stories, and my technical background, I kind of step in and facilitate a lot of the technical side of this. So I saw a lot of those questions, and I met up with some of the members of the course as I've been traveling, and it's just a lot of the same stuff. There's a lot of things people don't know, and I'm low man on the totem pole, right? I'm a writer's PA and a PA in other regards, but I've had the ability to sit in that outside of the writer's room and in the writer's room on a few occasions, and it's just a different world. So, that's the ability to learn things in that course for me, to see what you look for as a showrunner in craft, what your perspective is on selling a pilot, and that's probably not going to happen. It could, but it probably not. And so what should you focus on? Craft, and what is craft, and how do you actually work on your story, and what elements belong to a story? Those are things I didn't learn in a 4-year program. I didn't learn in other online programs. And so there's a lot of value that came from that,
right.
But there are also a lot more questions.
Right.
And I think that's kind of led to your social media stuff.
Yeah, I started posting on social media and, on Instagram, and anyone listening, go follow me there at Michael Jamin Writer. But then it became, okay, well, the next step was people just wanted to hear more. So this became the podcast, and all this stuff is the course is really the nuts and bolts of how do we literally write? How do we how do we break it down as if you were in the writer's room, as if you were working for me? This is exactly the steps we take every day to turn an idea into an episode of television. And the podcast is more kind of peripheral stuff about, how I got into the business, how you can get into the business, and little things that are not quite so writing centric, but more.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be some of that, but it's really, there are a lot of questions people ask, and what I've noticed from reading through your social media comments, because you had some stuff on TikTok hit 500,000 almost.
That was nuts.
Views, 400,000, 300,000 on one, 200,000 on another. And a lot of the questions people ask are these same exact questions lots of people are asking. Mm-hmm. And these exist in resources. This podcast is not the only place where you can get a lot of this information. There's Script Notes podcast, a bunch of other really good places where you can have actual working writers teach you great, valuable stuff. But in general, there are a lot of very specific questions that aren't being answered, and things that I wish I would have known earlier.
Right.
Which gives us the opportunity to talk about it from those two perspectives. You, 26 years in, me, a decade plus into my writing attempts, and still learning every single day, and learning what I don't know now that I'm sitting adjacent to writers in a writer's room.
Right. So I guess we'll talk about kind of how I got into the business. Like I said, I didn't go to film school. It was my childhood dream. When I was first watching Cheers on Thursday nights on NBC, I was like, I want to be the guy who writes the lines for Norm. I didn't realize the one writer writes the entire script. I just thought maybe there was a writer who writes Norm's lines, and there's a different writer who does Diane. I had no clue. And so that was my goal. And after college, I graduated college 2 weeks later. I got my wisdom teeth pulled because I still had insurance. And then I got in my car and I drove from New York all the way to LA. Didn't really know where I was going to stay. And then I found a roommate, and that's kind of how I broke into the business. Just kind of hustling and begging and setting up.
So let me ask, you come from an economically wealthy background. And you are impoverished. You grew up on the other side of the spectrum. Yeah, I grew up, food stamps, Social Security, welfare, did the foster home thing as a kid for a while. I was definitely on the other side. But it's interesting because since I was 18 years old, I've really focused on personal development, what people might have called self-help. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of excuses that people will come up with about what it takes to break in. Yeah. And I think this is one of those, which is you have to be wealthy to break in. But I know plenty of writers who did not come from a wealthy background.
Yeah. I mean, it was I didn't have to worry, I I just didn't have to worry about certain things. But when I got out here, I got a job. Like it wasn't like I was getting checks every day from my parents.
You were scooping ice cream.
I was working at Humphrey Yogurt in it's a yogurt store. And so I did that, and then then I finally got PA jobs. My first PA job, I think I was making $300 a week, and
I'm making a little bit more than that in 2020.
Yeah, right.
2021.
And I mean, it's interesting. So it's like people say, well, at least back then, and it's true, in Los Angeles, when I moved up to PA where I was making maybe $400 a week, and $400 a week allowed me to get a studio apartment where I could live by myself for, because it wasn't that expensive. My rent was maybe $600 a month. And now in LA, you can't get anything near that. So you have to get roommates, right? So
yeah, I had 5 roommates at one point in the house. I still live in the same house. I'm married now with a kid, and I had to build a bunch of businesses to establish myself. This was all part of a freaking 10-year plan to make it to LA and be able to do this. And so I get there are economical difficulties that hold you back, but there are ways to make it happen.
Yeah.
So I have extra income that comes in from businesses that I own, but I also have PA money that comes in to help me out. Right. And I can live in LA on PA salary. I have proven that. We had 5 roommates in a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house out in the middle of the valley.
Right.
And my rent was like $650.
Right.
Split.
So yeah, it can be done. I mean, I get it was easier for me back then, but in some ways it was more difficult because this is 1992. There was no internet, and I couldn't even. The idea of becoming a television writer was like, well, I didn't know any TV writers. I didn't know anyone who was. I didn't now. You can go on the internet. You can get there were no podcasts. All I knew was if I wanted to work in Hollywood, I better be in Hollywood, and then I'll figure it out. But now it's like you can live across the world and get all this content like this podcast for free, and you can learn so much without ever leaving your bedroom,
Yeah, and one of the things you talk about in your course, not to bring it up again, but I think it's really valuable, is you have to live in LA because that's where the writing happens, but you don't have to live in LA to practice your craft.
That's right.
Right. And some of the first advice you gave me is you need to be in LA because when they need someone, they need them today. And if you're not here today, they'll just call the next guy in line or the next girl in line, and there's 10,000 of those people.
Right.
But being here helps. And, the show I work on now that you work on as well, that's happened because I was available that day.
Right. And to get to your point about your craft, it doesn't really matter. If you're not ready, if your writing isn't at that level, it doesn't matter if Steven Spielberg owes you a favor. You know what I'm saying? If you can get your script in Spielberg's hand, if the script is no good, it's not going to do. What difference does it make? So it's not really about who you know. It's about are you writing at the right level before who you know. And most people skip that. Everyone's like, why? They say how do I get my script into the right hands? And,
I have a personal story for this. I don't think you've ever talked about, but I had a roommate. His dad was college roommates with a pretty prominent, and I mean very prominent showrunner here in LA. I'm trying to anonymize this a little bit.
Right.
But when you think showrunners, you think of this guy. And it was his brother. And so he got to sit in the writer's room over a summer as an intern and literally sit in the writer's room every day with this person. And then he said, when you have a script ready for me to see, send it. Right. So he sent it to the showrunner and he blew his shot. Because the script he sent wasn't, first of all, the script he sent wasn't even related to the tone of what the showrunner writes. And number 2, it was not ready. He didn't have enough peer review, you could even say, let alone have the craft skills.
Right.
And he lives in Colorado now. He moved home.
He blew his shot. Right. Yep. And that's a shame because everyone thinks their script is ready. I guarantee you, and I thought when I was young, I thought my script was ready.
Hi guys, Michael Jamin here. I wanted to take a break from talking and talk just a little bit more. I think a lot of you guys are getting bad advice on the internet. I know this because I'm getting tagged. One guy tagged me with this. He said, I heard from a script reader in the industry. And I was like, wait, what? Hold on, stop. My head blew up, I blacked out. And when I finally came to, I was like, listen, dude, there are no script readers in the industry. By definition, these are people on the outside of the industry. They work part-time, they give their right arm to be in the industry, and instead they're giving you advice on what to do and you're paying for this? I mean, that just made me nuts, man. These people are unqualified to give my dog advice. And by the way, her script is coming along quite nicely. And I'm not done. Another thing, when I work with TV writers who are new on writing staffs, a lot of these guys flame out after 13 episodes. So they get this big break, they finally get in, and then they flame out because they don't know what is expected of them on the job. And that's sad because, that's not going to happen again. So to fight all this, to flush all this bad stuff out of your head, I post daily tips on social media. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook at Michael Jamin Writer. If you don't have time, 2 minutes a day to devote towards improving your craft, guys, it's not going to happen. Let's just be honest. So go find me, make it happen. All right, now back to my previous rant.
And so the people ask a question like, well, how do I get my script into the right hands? And I made a post about this a few weeks ago, and it kind of blew up. Everyone's like, wow, that makes sense. My point is you shouldn't ask how do I get my script into the right hands. You should ask, how do I write a script so good that it doesn't matter whose hands it falls into? And that's honestly the truth, because if you write a script and it's great, and then someone, you give it to a friend of a friend of a friend who knows someone who's in the business, they'll read it and they go, oh, this is really good. I'm going to pass this up the ladder because if I'm doing that person a favor, I'm giving them something that's amazing. They're going to thank me for this gem that I gave them. And then it's going to finally land in someone's hand. Maybe that person's a producer, and that person is going to read it and say, listen, I can't do anything for this script, but you are an immense talent. And I want to work with you, not because I'm trying to help you, but because I'm going to make money off of you. I'm going to exploit you. You're going to be like, great, exploit me. I'm going to exploit you because I need what you have. And now it changes the whole power dynamic. Instead of you begging, how do I get my script into the right hand? Begging people to read it, now people are begging you to work with you because you have something of value. But everyone skips that step. Everyone's like, I know how to write. I know how to hold a pen, therefore I know how to write. Or I know how to watch a movie, therefore I know how to write a movie. Which is, of course, it's just not. It's a skill. I look at screenwriting as a craft, and you have to learn your craft. I wasn't born with this. Believe me, my first scripts were terrible. I had to learn all this. And so what I learned in this course is stuff that I learned from working from writers who are way more talented, way more successful than I am, like Steve Levitan and Chris Lloyd and Greg Daniels. And all this stuff they just passed down to me because I was on the writing staff. And then I eventually became a showrunner, and I approach story a little bit differently than they do. That's not to say better or worse. It's just I approach it a little differently.
Yeah, would you call that voice? Is that when people say the term voice, your voice is different?
Well, every writer has a different voice, but also in terms of how they approach story. Everyone kind of, I find different writers. Some writers are a little more intuitive, and they just know in their gut, like they're just born with that gift. And I wasn't born with that gift, so I have a process that I use and that I teach. It's the process that I use, and because I'm not a natural born storyteller. Some people are, but of those people are very rare, I think.
So what I'm hearing you say is someone who, has been told I have writing talent, but felt very unfocused, is that I can learn to focus the talent I have through a process.
Yeah, right.
It's learnable. It's not, a God-given gift that you just have. You're not some innate thing that evolution gave you. But you can learn how to do this.
Yeah, and it's funny because I had a friend of the family was here about a week or two ago, and she's working on a play, and so she's stuck. She's been working on this for months, and she's stuck, and she wanted to bounce it off of me. And I go, okay, just tell me the story. And I kept on interrupting her. No, that doesn't go with me. That doesn't. And at the end, because she was blocked. And in the end, I go, okay, well, here's your story. This is what you need here. Bottom of Act 1, middle of Act 2. This is what you need. Here's what I would do. And it wasn't like I wasn't telling her. I wasn't critiquing her story. I was saying, okay, if this is the story you want to tell, this is what you need to do. I wasn't telling her whether it was a good story or a bad story. I wasn't like that. That's subjective. I said, if this is the one story you want to tell, this is what it needs. And at the end of we talked for about an hour. It was like she had witnessed a magic trick. And it was very easy for me. It was like, oh, because I do this every day. But she was like, wow, that helps. Thank you so much. Now I know how to proceed. And I hadn't critiqued it. I didn't say whether it was good or bad. I just said, this is what you need to do to tell this one story.
Yeah, I've experienced that with you as well. I think you came over to my house to help me out to break a feature on a whiteboard that I had in this office at one point. And it was like the same thing. It was just like literally watching like a masterwork. I consider craft to be like, I'm a carpenter.
Yeah.
Like I can like look at me. Like I have a saw, and I have a hammer, and I have nails. Can I make a cabinet? In theory, yes. But is that a cabinet someone's going to want to pay $10,000 to do in a custom remodel in a home? Absolutely not. And so my skill set as a writer 10 years ago versus my skill set now compared to your skill set as a showrunner who's 26 years experience, vastly different scale. And I think pay changes and follows that skill set as well.
Yeah.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is there's a craft, there's a skill set, you can learn these things. It doesn't change your unique perspective, your voice, your tone, the way you see the world, your life experience, and all those beautiful things that you bring to the table that no one else can bring.
Right.
But it gives you a structure in which frees you up to express those things in your unique way.
Yeah, and it's almost like connect the dots. It's like, okay, for this story you need point A, B, C, D, and E, or whatever. And I'm not gonna budge. We need that point A, we need point B. How you want to get from A to B is your decision. But I'm not gonna let you, we need to have A and B, right?
Yeah.
And so there's plenty of room for creativity. Like I'm not saying you decide how you want to get from A to B. You could take a plane, you could take a boat, you could take a car, whatever. But we need A and B. So it was interesting that because she was so impressed, and I was like, I don't know why you're. It wasn't that impressive from where I stand. It was like, oh, this is like a day's worth of work. It's not really like this is what I do for a living. It's not because I was hit on the head with lightning or anything. It's just
but it's impressive when you watch someone who understands a skill set. So, like I was a missionary on the border for 2 years, and I remember this one time we were out with this member of our church, and we were talking to some people, and their car was broken down. And this guy was literally a master mechanic. That was his title. And he walked over and he's like, what's going on? And they're like this. He's like, try to turn it over. And they did. And he just popped the hood and he grabs a cable from one side and another cable, twists them together, and he goes, try it. And it just fired right up.
Right.
Because he understood from the sound it made how to make that work.
Right.
But it just looks like magic. It was sorcery to us.
Yeah, right. And it's just a craft. So I always encourage people. Most people don't want to learn their craft. They just want the big bag of money with a dollar sign on it. Or they
So when you moved to LA, you sold your first pilot right away, right? Like the first thing you wrote, someone bought.
Yeah, right. It was so super easy. I just walked up. I said, "Hey, Hollywood, I'm here," and they backed up the Brinks truck. It was so easy. That's the fictional version. The real version is, I had to. First of all, I sent out resumes to try to get a job as a PA. I just wanted to be on a stage somewhere, on a sound stage. I want to be a sitcom writer. I want to be somewhere adjacent to sitcoms. And I sent out tons of resumes, and no one wanted to hire me. And finally, after that's when I was working at the yogurt store. Finally, my roommate said, "Listen, you're just sitting here. Why, you can work at the yogurt store at night. During the day, why don't you just tell them you'll work for free?" So fine, I called up. At the time, it was a show called Evening Shade with Burt Reynolds, and I'd already sent out resumes to the people there, and I called them up again. And I said, "Listen, what if I come in and I work for free?" The producer was like, "Sure, okay, we can work you for free." So I went in, and I was wearing a suit and tie, right? Like like no one in Hollywood wears suit and ties, but for some reason I was like, I want to impress him with a suit and tie. He goes, "Okay, you can start tomorrow, and I'll pay you $300 a week," because it was a hit show. They had a little discretionary money. And I was like, wow, $300. I was like, this is a blessing because I would have done it for free, right? Yeah. And so that was how I got in. And then 6 months later, all these other resumes that I had sent out earlier, they started coming in. Then people started responding to me because, there were just no job openings then. But they eventually, if you send out enough, they will come.
Well, that's an important point too. Is this industry is very seasonal. Like there are seasons when they're shooting pilots, and there's seasons when you're in the writer's room. Typically, I think COVID's kind of changed a lot of that. Right?
It's also cable and streaming has changed a lot. So,
but at the time, right, it's like we're in development season, and now we're shooting pilots, and now we're shooting our show.
That's what it was then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I arrived in Hollywood in June, and I arrived literally like 3 weeks too late. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that was just hustle, and then of course, from there, it wasn't like I became a writer right away. I managed to find. I wanted to learn how to be a screenwriter, and I was lucky enough to find an old, crotchety, retired TV writer who taught lessons like on the dining room table, and that I was like, that's who I wanted to learn from. I didn't want to learn from a professional writer, a professional teacher. I didn't want to take the standard classes that everyone else was taking. I wanted to find from someone who had the job that I wanted. And so this guy, he wrote on like so many amazing. He wrote on the original. He wrote on Get Smart, the original Twilight Zone, right? All these Andy Griffith Show, and now he's retired. He just taught in his dining room, and I learned so much from that guy. And then from there, that was
right?
Writing for Dough. That was his book about Bill Idelson. It's a great book. And then from there, I managed to, write enough good spec script, and I managed to get an agent, and then my agent teamed me up with another writer who, and I wrote a story about this actually, and I was like the new hot baby writer. She actually hires, she brings on, they don't hire, an agent like signs a new baby writer every year, and she blew a lot of smoke up my ass. You're the baby, I'm going to turn you into a showrunner, you're going to be a star, in 3 years you're going to have your own show. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I kind of sobered up, and I was like, oh, I wonder what happened to the baby writer from the year earlier. And I called her up, I was just curious, and she gave me his name, and I called him up, and I was like, hey, so we have the same agent. What show are you running? You must be running a show now. And he was like, dude, I work at a record store. And so it didn't happen for him. And then my heart sank. I was like, oh my God, it's not going to happen for me either. And I read some of his work, and he was actually a better writer than me. I was able to look at his work next to mine and go, oh my God, this guy's better than me. But I was hotter than him. In other words, I was the flavor of the day, according to this agent. And so we teamed up. Rather than compete against each other, we teamed up and we started writing together. And that was, years ago, and we're still writing together today. So
that's awesome. So it's not like what I've learned from all the writers I know, professional writers, and all the majority of the writers that I've listened to on podcasts, their overnight success was not an overnight success.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. Yeah.
No. So it's not something that one should expect. It's not typical. And that's why focusing on your craft is so important. Like you said, you have to be able to write something so good that the other person has an opportunity to exploit, for lack of a better term, you. Like, they see value, they're going to get value out of it. Either clout with their boss or money, right? Because ultimately, if a producer brings this stuff in, they're going to be signed on and they're going to generate revenue off of this in addition to revenue they make off of you, right?
But also, some people think, well, I have this amazing screenplay. How do I sell my screenplay? And you're not. It's a calling card for you to get more work. Like, no one wants to make your screenplay. They want to make their screenplay. The producer wants to make their project. The studio wants to make their project. But they need a writer who knows how to do that. So if you have a great screenplay, that's a calling card. And then they say, okay, we're not going to do this, but let's work with you on something else. And are you going to say yes or no? So like some people are like, well, I just want to sell. I'm really a plumber. I'm a dentist. I just want to sell the screenplay. Like, as if it works it doesn't work like that, dude. No one wants to help that person. They want someone who's serious about the craft, someone who's dedicated, their career to this. That's the person they want to work with. They're not looking at the plumber. What you think there's a shortage of ideas in Hollywood? There's no shortage of scripts here. We don't need to go to New Jersey to some plumber to buy their script, right? But if you want to become a screenwriter, you need to learn the craft, and it's a calling card, and then you'll get more work. So it's one thing, to sell or to sell your script, or even to get on writing stuff, but it's another thing to turn it into a career. It's much, much harder to make a career out of it, which is something which I've done, fortunately, for 26 years. So I'm certainly not a famous screenwriter. There aren't many, to be honest. There aren't many household names for TV writers. I mean, that's just not. No one knows who we are. But I'm the guy. I've been kicking around. I've made a career out of it, and I'm fortunate enough to be doing it for 26 years. So.
Oh, that's awesome. And for me, I think there's a dearth of experience there, right? There's just so much experience that we can learn from. I've definitely learned a ton from you.
Yeah.
I think the people who've taken your course have learned a ton from you. So hopefully this podcast is a way to bridge that and help share some of that information with other people and share that. So that kind of backs me to a pretty important question, which I think I've always asked, which is, what are the skill sets that I need to know in order to make it as a writer? And that might be a broad question, but I'd love to hear your answer.
Well, first and foremost, it's like I said, it's one thing you can get, like, you may get lucky and get on staff, but if you do not know how to write, you will flame out and you will not write it. You will not get hired again. Like, so, okay, you got to, and you see this happen a lot. Like, you'll see someone teaching at a film school and they had one credit, or, that's kind of their calling card, is that their show?
Well, not to put out like an ominous tone, but that was something you told me when I asked you. I said, hey, I want to move to LA because you gave me that advice. You have to be in LA.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I've been offered this scholarship opportunity to go to film school. And you said, well, here's where the writing happens. And film school, you'll probably get a network out of it. That might help you. But the other benefit is you'll probably be able to teach a university someday if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's like, because you have to have a master's degree to teach at a university.
That's right.
Like, that's the benefit, is there's some job security that you could then go teach that same stuff you learned in school to other kids who are in school.
Right. That interests you, right? But it's a lot of people. That brings me to my next point. Is people say like, can I break into Hollywood without going to Hollywood? So you're basically saying, Hollywood, come to me. I'm unwilling to go to you, Hollywood. You have to come to me. So if you want Hollywood to get off its ass and come to you, you better really be offering something pretty special. And it can't be a mediocre script. And you would say, well, but Hollywood's filled with mediocre scripts. Okay, whatever, we can argue over that. Maybe it is. But they don't need your mediocre script. They're not going to come to you. So if you want Hollywood to come to you, you better damn well know what you're doing. And that means knowing your craft and other things, which we'll talk about in another podcast. But there's really no substitute to being an excellent writer. And it's not good enough is not good enough.
This has been an episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin and Phil Hudson. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with someone who needs to hear today's subject. If you're looking to support yourself, I'd encourage you to consider investing in Michael's screenwriting course at michaeljamin.com/course. I've known Michael for over a decade, and in the past 7 years, I've begged him to put something together. During the global COVID-19 pandemic, Michael had time, and I have to say, I wish I'd had this course 10 years ago. As someone who's personally invested in most online courses, earned a bachelor's degree, and actively studied screenwriting for over a decade, this course has been more valuable to me than most of the effort I've put in because it focuses on something no one else teaches: story. In his course, Michael pulls back the curtain and shows you exactly what the pros do in a writer's room, and that knowledge has made all the difference for me, and I know it will for you too. You can find more information at michaeljamin.com/course. For free daily screenwriting tips, follow Michael on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Michael Jamin Writer. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Phil A. Hudson. This episode was produced by Phil Hudson and edited by Dallas Crane. Until next time, keep writing.